Well, hello. And today we have a very special guest, Jenn Curtis, who is the owner of FutureWise, an academic consultancy for college admissions. And she's also the co author of The Parent Compass, which I was very, very excited to read. So I'm really looking forward to just jumping into our conversation today. There's so much to learn. I loved reading the book. I highly recommend it for any parent. And this is really geared towards more parents of teenagers. But as a mom of elementary school kids, I found it so useful. So, so it's such a pleasure to have you. And what is the main message behind your book, The Parent Compass? What does the term mean, the parent compass? That you develop quite a bit in a book, but
Sure. So maybe it would help to give a little bit of background of where the Parent Compass came from and then kind of what the message behind it is. The Parent Compass was kind of born out of Operation Varsity Blues. It is not about the college admissions scandal in any way, but that was sort of the catalyst for it. The day that Operation Varsity Blues broke, my co-author and I called one another kind of just aghast at what we were seeing play out on our television screens in the media. And we started to have these very real conversations about parenting behavior that we were seeing in our own offices. And those things did not amount to fraud and bribery as we were seeing play out, but we were seeing parents who were overstepping and overparenting. And in turn, we were seeing patterns of kids who were coming into our offices. I work primarily with tweens and teens who were burned out and they were stressed out and they were voiceless and they were unmotivated. And we wanted to provide tools for parents to look at the teen years a little bit differently, to look at them in a way that to kind of garner these parenting practices that would instead contribute to their teens' wellness and well-being and academic success at the same time. And so the Parent Compass is really a treasure trove of strategies and tips to help parents kind of facilitate foster the relationships with their kids during the high school years, during a very competitive and stressful time, but to come out of it with intact relationships with their teens.
absolutely. And there are a lot of books and there's a lot of focus for parents when they have teens in high school on really how to get their kid into the best college or into college overall. So why, again, did you focus more on the well-being of the child and their development rather, again, what often seems to be the most pressing priority for parents today?
We were seeing, as I mentioned, these kids who were burned out and they were stressed out. And so they weren't performing well in school, or maybe they were making it through high school, but they were getting to college and they were falling apart and they didn't have the skills to really thrive in college. And so we wanted to give parents tools to help their kids thrive, both in high school and then beyond. The goal was to really help parents understand their appropriate role in navigating the tween and teen years. And then to help their kids develop resilience and grit and intention and to embrace failure. We even talk about self-reliance and purpose and intention and setting goals so that when they got to college, they could thrive.
Wonderful, especially, we talk about grit and integrity and self-motivation. These are all the ideal qualities, right, that a parent should want to develop in their child. You focus, and we'll get back to that because I think that's really the meat and bones of your book. And I think that's also so helpful for parents of younger kids to start thinking about and working in that direction. In your book, you really do emphasize a lot that parents should take a step back, particularly in the children's teenage years. and let the children, guide their own process, their own schooling, their own goals. When do you think parents should start making steps like that? Because still, you can say in elementary school and middle school, the parent is still largely, the manager of their children's lives, their children's schooling. How do you make that transition, and when does it start?
So I think you can actually start decently early with age appropriate tasks. So yes, you are largely the manager when your child is in elementary school. When they start to get into middle school, you can start to give them a bit more autonomy. But I think that there are some very potent ways to help kids develop self-advocacy skills very early on. So some examples that we do in our home are when we go to a restaurant, my kids must order their food. They're perfectly capable of doing it. And it has made them much more comfortable conversing with adults. So they have to order their food. If they want a cup of water, they need to ask for the water. If they want something to color, they need to ask for that. And I think that in giving them these little opportunities like that, they start to understand that they have a voice and that that voice is valued. Another example is when we go to the doctor. My kids have the opportunity first, before I jump in to fill in the blanks, to tell the doctor why we're there, what hurts, or what's bothering them. And in doing so, again, they get comfortable advocating for their needs and saying what is wrong or what they need more of, before I do it for them. And then, of course, especially when we're at the doctor, well, of course, I know more than they do. And so I do have to jump in and fill in the blanks. But again, they're getting the first pass at it. So I think that those things can actually start very early on.
And your kids are quite young, Jen, just for the audience. How old are your kids?
They are. I have a 5, almost 6-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Okay, so from the age of 5 and 8, you're teaching them to self-advocate and to have their own voice and being able to communicate and articulate with adults. I mean, that's a wonderful, I think, advice for parents. And
yeah, and I think
your philosophy.
There are lots of these small opportunities. I think as parents, we're just I'm the parent, and it's easier a lot of the time. It's easier to jump in and just tell the doctor why we're there, because it takes less time. But I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned in sitting back and zipping our lips and letting our kids have the first pass.
Mm-hmm. What about self-motivation? And a lot of parents are concerned when they have a very bright child, but the child appears, academically unmotivated. What steps would you advise that parents take, and again, as early as elementary school, to try to help develop your child's academic self-motivation?
I think there are a few things that parents can do to develop motivation. One is simply to give your kids room to explore, to support what excites them and not you. We all have our preferences, and we all have our talents and abilities. And sometimes as parents, we can, want to kind of live vicariously through our kids. But in the Parent Compass, we like to say, you had your turn. This is your kid's turn. So support what excites them. And then my co-author actually came up with this approach to school, which my co-author is Cindy Muchnick. And she does some great things with study skills and time management. And she came up with treating school like a job. So just as we as adults have to go to our job every day, whether it's being a mom or volunteering or going to an office, we have to show up every day, and we have to, we have to be present for our boss. We can teach kids to treat school in that way. They have 6, 7 bosses sometimes. And, that is their job. That's what they get up to do every day. And sometimes when we can do that, we can teach them that, school is something to be excited about. And that can in turn help their motivation. And I think also, again, you're probably going to hear me say this a lot today, but going back to those self-advocacy skills, I think when students feel empowered in the classroom, they become more motivated. When they feel that they have a voice and they can go to their teacher and tell their teacher what they need, and what they're not getting and what they need help with, that can in turn influence their academic motivation as well.
So, and you talk about getting kids excited about school or about their passions and their interests, but sometimes parents complain that, well, my kid just wants to watch cartoons or TV or YouTube videos or play video games. So how do you get beyond that? Let's say, I mean, you could beyond these, let's say, narrow interests of some children.
I think role modeling is a huge thing in parenting in general, obviously, but when it comes to academics. So one way to get them excited about school is to be excited about it yourself. If you don't role model excitement for school, they're not likely to do that as well. So parents can be learners themselves. They can talk about the value of learning. They can take classes themselves. They can be caught reading books a lot and constantly challenging themselves to grow in their own learning. Model a lifelong dedication to growing, their own intellectual curiosity. You can also, I think, help get them excited by maybe getting them into things that are outside the classroom. So maybe they're school related, but they are, joining the band or joining the school play. They're so good getting into a club, those kinds of things that happen at school, but they're not in the classroom. If students start to get excited about different things that they're doing on their campus, then that can also bleed into getting excited in the classroom. I have a wonderful example. So my co-author and I, we will jump in on book clubs. So book clubs are a fantastic side effect that we really didn't expect that book clubs were going to grow out of the Parent Compass, but they have, and we have got book clubs popping up all over the country. And what we'll do is occasionally we'll pop into them and they can ask us questions. And we popped into a book club once, and this woman told us a story about how she had a very academically unmotivated child who she knew could be excited about school, but the child just wasn't. And they read the Parent Compass, and they decided that they were going to get her involved in wrestling. And so the student got into wrestling and found that it was her calling. It was her thing. She loved it. And lo and behold, as soon as she started to get into that, she became more excited about going to school, and that bled into the classroom, and her grades came up as well. So I think just getting them excited about things that are,
important to them.
Yeah, exactly. And then I also think this might sound counterintuitive, perhaps, but I think you can get them excited about school by giving them downtime, because I think when our kids are too overscheduled and they're going from this activity to that activity to this, I mean, just hearing the carpool conversations about where people are headed, it can get overwhelming just to listen to it, but I think it can get very overwhelming for the kids as well. And when they don't have downtime built into their schedules, their excitement for school can wane. So making sure that the activities that they're involved in are activities that they're really committed to and excited about, and then they're getting the downtime that they need that's built into their schedule, that can also help get them excited for school.
No, absolutely. I think this overwhelming schedule that so many children are, involved in, and so many as young as honestly lower elementary, even preschool years. I mean, sometimes they have a full schedule, and I hear so many moms saying, I feel like I'm a executive assistant to a executive, and the executive is the child, right? And you're running the schedule from morning to evening, but truly it is overwhelming for young children. Young children, I think, are they have a difficult time with running an 8, 10, or even more hour day packed with school activities, enrichment, homework, sports, and so on. So they definitely do need downtime, as you say. I think that's such an important point, not to feel that burnout. In terms of, because you work as a college admissions counselor, and nonetheless in college admissions, academics is very important, and especially if you're considering, the more selective colleges. So how do you start setting up your child for academic excellence? And what are some of the steps you can do earlier on so it's not a last minute, kind of push in high school to try to figure this out?
I think my biggest piece of advice for this is kind of goes back to the whole reason that we wrote the Parent Compass. And if you remember in the beginning, I was talking about
Yes.
parents who were overstepping and over tutoring and over managing, and the kids were burned out and stressed out, and their academic success can suffer from that. And so I think that parents can give them the tools while not overstepping. Parents, at least in, I should say, in particular in my area, I live in a pretty competitive academic and social area. Parents can tend to get too involved, and it's not uncommon to have a tutor for every single subject. But what they're doing is they're hand holding to an extreme, and they're taking away students' sense of agency instead of empowering them. They teach them that, you need a tutor in every single subject because you can't do it on your own. So instead, I think parents can give them tools to self-advocate. For example, give them study tools, but not overstepping.
And this extensive tutoring continues then on in college. There's so many cases now where students arrive in college, and then again, they have to have tutors for all of their classes in college. So I think it is a slippery slope with the excessive tutoring, as you discuss. Um, Another question, and you talk a lot about self-advocacy. I think you have to have a certain level of confidence for self-advocacy, especially at a young age. How do you does that go hand in hand, confidence and self-advocacy, and how do you develop confidence in young children?
One is by being present. We can give our kids confidence by letting them know that we understand them, and we're there, and we value them. So I think one is we talk in the Parent Compass about really, really listening. And I found a quote recently that I love, and I can't attribute it to whoever it is because I actually don't know who said it. I think when I found it, it was anonymous, but it is something to the effect of the words silent. It's silent and listen have the same letters. And I think that as parents, that's something that I have tried to adopt into my own life. Because when I put down the phone, turn off my notifications, I am then truly present for my kids. And that is what is giving them confidence and a voice. So I would say that is one of the biggest things that I try to do is being present, not trying to jump in and fix things. So when they come to me with a problem, I trust me, I make mistakes every single day, especially with this. But when they come to me with a problem, I really try to zip my lips and ask them, what is it that you need from me? Do you need my advice? Do you want me to just listen? Do you want a hug? And I think when we can step back instead of jumping in and fixing and giving advice all the time, that's when we're going to help our kids build their confidence, feeling valued and truly understood.
So it's independence in a way, right? Fostering a child's independence, which leads to more self-confidence, which in turn helps the child be able to self-advocate, right? Well, would you say there's a bit of a progression, or some of these skills go hand in hand?
My opinion is that self-advocacy and confidence absolutely go hand in hand.
And I think, again, a lot of parents will think this is the ideal scenario, but then they think at their particular situation and their child. And let's say, even just something, let's discuss something like quite specific, like homework, right? To what extent, where can the parents start stepping back, or to what extent parents have to help their children with homework, and how should that evolve from the elementary years to the middle school years to the high school years?
Yeah. So it is a tough question because, I think there are so many different perspectives, and I think every child is different and unique. So of course you got to figure out what's going to work best for your family. But I think as a general rule, I think homework is to practice independence. That is part of the point of homework. And so certainly for elementary school kids, I don't think we can expect a first grader to come home and sit down and finish their homework, all by themselves. So sure, for elementary school, I think parents absolutely can be present, but I think that they can also be a presence while helping the child to understand where to go to look for their answers, or how to look things up. Instead of, certainly at no age should a parent ever be actually doing homework for their child. I think as time goes on, we can also help give our kids structure. So for instance, for a middle schooler, maybe you're helping the middle schooler understand that the order in which to do homework. I think helping them organize and give structure in the middle school years is completely fine. Again, they should be absolutely doing their own homework, but we can help them understand that, for example, you hate math. Okay, well then let's do math first when you're fresh, when you get home from school, and then you can do your, quote, easier subjects later on in the evening when you're a little more tired or spent from doing all your work. So I think in those years, we can really give them some structure. And then also helping them to incorporate breaks. So maybe helping to set a timer for them. Okay, do homework for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, whatever's appropriate for their age level. And then helping them understand that you take a break. You can't be expected to sit down and do your homework for 3 hours. It's just, it's not appropriate. So helping them do that. And then I think as they get into high school, they should be pretty autonomous in their homework. And hopefully you've helped them to develop the habits by that age.
You talk a lot about good habits in the Parent Compass. And I think what you're discussing right now, the examples, this is setting up your children with good habits for right now and for the future, in terms of prioritizing their work, in terms of taking breaks, in terms of having even just sleep. I noted you emphasize that in the book. And I'm also, that's a big topic for me. And I think it's very important that children get enough sleep. And if they're not getting enough sleep, they cannot perform in whatever, those overscheduled activities they're placed in. Could you tell me a little bit what some other key good habits you think children should start developing in elementary school years?
Wow. I would have said sleep. That's funny because I honestly, I think my two biggest ones are sleep and self-advocacy. I'm huge on those. I would say maybe my best answer would be goal setting. We have a whole chapter of goal setting in the Parent Compass. And I do goal setting with all of my high school students that I work with on a yearly basis. I do goal setting in my own life. In fact, my husband and I last night were just talking about, we do goal setting at the beginning of the year every year. And we were setting the date when we're going to sit down and do that. But to answer your question, I also have tried hard to instill goal setting habits in my kids as well. And I think that this is something that we can do in an age appropriate way from a very young age. And the reason is that goal setting helps to instill a mindset of intention. It helps kids think through what it is that they want to achieve and how they're going to get there. And I think that can play out over the lifespan in, obviously in different ways. So one way that we do it in our household is that my kids set a goal, or call it an intention, every morning on the way to school. And it's something that they are in the habit of. We get to a certain place when we're driving along, and they kind of like, oh, okay, what's everybody's goal today? And we go around and we all set a goal for the day. And for them, it's something as simple as helping out their teacher, or being kind to the child who gets picked on, or whatever it might be for that day. But they are thinking through what it is that they want to do that day, and then they're intentional about how they're going to do it. So I think that that's probably the biggest thing that I would instill as another habit.
Oh, that's a wonderful habit. So on a daily basis, your children come up with a goal for the day. Do you also have them come up with goals for, I don't know, the week, the school semester, the year, or no?
At their age, I would keep it to either the daily intentions. Sometimes we call it a goal, or sometimes we just kind of call it an intention, so it doesn't get overwhelming for them. For my older child, yes, we do sit down and talk about more kind of like, okay, well, what's the 8-year-old? Yes. Something that maybe she would want to accomplish over a semester, a couple months. My younger child, we just do the daily ones. But I think, every child is different. And I think parents can kind of feel out what's most appropriate for them, as long as you're teaching them the skills of, building intention.
Wonderful advice. And I'm going to implement this habit as well with my kids. So I appreciate that. I enjoyed reading about it as well in the book. So I wanted to ask you, because again, your focus is really as a consultant in the college admission process, and there's a big debate. I think when kind of I went to college, or when I was in high school, the term everyone was used was well-rounded, and you wanted to show you're well-rounded on your college application, and parents wanted to overall raise well-rounded kids. Now in the more specific literature or comments from college admissions officers, that really they're not looking for well-rounded kids to a degree. And I'm talking about the very highly, highly selective colleges and universities. More they're looking for angular or lopsided kids, kids with some very specific achievements and talents. I wanted to get your input on this, you can say debate, or these shifts in perception. And what would you advise parents and children to consider as they're developing either their well-roundedness or their angularness?
So I think if we're talking about, as a whole, I think that there's room for both well-rounded students and the kind of pointy students, if you will. And I see all of them. I see some kids who come in and they haven't quite figured out what it is they want to do with the rest of their life. And they spend high school exploring, and high school should be a time to explore. So, and they embrace that, and they go to a school where that is the right fit, where they're going to have the opportunity to continue to explore a wide variety of interdisciplinary studies. But I will say, to your question specifically, in my experience, for the more highly competitive college admission, those students tend to be pointier. Those are the students who tend to have figured out at an early age what it is that makes them tick. Is it neuroscience? Is it joining neuroscience and AI? Is it computer science? Is it psychology? And then they have really developed a resume of a variety of ways to explore whatever that interest is. So they kind of go very deep into, I like to give the example of photography is what I meant to say, just because it's an easy example to understand. So if a student is interested in photography, maybe they take a photography class at their school, but then they max out on that. So they go out and they take another photography class at some an art school that'll allow high school students to take classes there, and then maybe they decide, I want to get my hands dirty doing this, so they go and get a job at a real estate office and take photos of the houses that are for sale, and then they enter their work in contests, and maybe win some of those contests, and then maybe they join the yearbook staff and they practice photography in that way. So I think it's an easy way to understand of all the variety of ways that you can explore that one interest.
Mm-hmm. So if we're speaking about the competitive colleges, the Ivy Leagues, the Stanfords, the MITs, you do see students who are more, let's say, angular or lopsided with a very clear interest and also accomplishments, right, already in this field.
Exactly. Yes. They tend to, when we're really talking about that level, you're talking about some extraordinary accomplishments, typically at the national level or even at the international level.
So in your book, you have a whole chapter dedicated to college rankings, and I think that the tone I'm getting from reading the book is that you're pretty skeptical about the U.S. News and World Report rankings. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that for our audience? You note many other factors that parents can look at when they're making the best choice for their students. And actually, well, I should say it more accurately, you would like the student to make that choice for themselves rather than the parents.
Sure. So, unfortunately, as a culture, I think we've kind of become hyper obsessed with name brand schools. And in part, that can be traced to the college rankings like those put out in the US News and World Report, although there are many, I should say, rankings systems out there. But I think what families don't understand is that the US News and World Report and some other rankings have flaws that are inherent in their algorithms. And they don't really address things like student debt load or whether or not a school is the right fit for a student. Are there an abundance of mentors available? That is actually a really huge indicator of college success. But instead, they rely on proxies and on data that has been misrepresented. There have been schools that have, really gotten in hot water for misrepresenting their data. And what I would want families to know, to answer your question, is that research actually tells us that it matters more what you do on your college campus than the name of where you go. So did you take advantage of those internship opportunities, or did you seek out a mentor? Those types of opportunities. Did you get involved in research? Did you get really excited about the research? Those things, according to research, are better indicators of long-term success than the name of where you actually go. So I think it's important to know that as a college counselor, I do advocate for the right fit school over simply a name. Yes.
Well, a follow-up question to that. Regarding the highly academic students who would really like to see themselves in a similar environment with their peers in essentially a highly selective college or an Ivy League, what type of advice would you give those students and their families in terms of their journey to end up in a similar type of place?
So, like, what should they be doing in high school?
Well, and earlier on, what should they be thinking about and doing in elementary school and middle school years as they lead up to high school, and in the high school years for the kids who are really highly academic and again would like to see themselves in a highly academic, highly selective institution.
Sure. So I think that this does kind of trace back to literally our whole conversation, and in particular our last question. um, I think one, obviously, if you're shooting for those types of schools, you have to excel in school. And so I think that those are the students that really do need to develop a significant level of intellectual curiosity. They need to be excited about learning and have a zest for exploration. And I think as parents, one thing that I really try to help them understand is those kids are the kids who actually look at failure and making mistakes as a challenge, as not an endpoint, but instead a starting point for what am I going to do differently next time? What am I going to change? So I think generally, I see those really, really, really highly competitive students look at failure in that way. So as parents, I think over those years, we can be helping to instill that mindset in them. I think also, getting involved in whatever it is that makes them tick and vehemently pursuing whatever that is. So if it's research, if it's engineering, whatever it is, get involved and really vehemently pursue that. And I think as parents, we can help to expose our children to some of those things and to help them brainstorm different ways that they can get involved. While I am kind of advocating a bit of a hands-off approach in terms of overstepping and over managing and over tutoring, there isn't anything wrong with helping to open doors for our kids and helping expose them to things that they may not know about or have explored. We can, be there to let them bounce ideas off of us. So I think those would be the biggest things, is kind of embracing that sort of growth mindset and the embracing of making mistakes and failure and curiosity. And then really, really starting to look at what it is that makes them tick and looking at it and exploring it in every possible way.
And some of these skills, in terms of the intellectual curiosity, the zest for learning, as you said, the growth mindset, the lack of fear of failure, and that all starts in the elementary school years.
I would say
Right.
so. Absolutely. I think it starts in us role modeling those things. One,
Yes.
and then in explicitly kind of slowly over time fostering those things in our kids. But I don't think role modeling can be what's the word I'm looking for, emphasized enough. I think it is so critical to our parenting, and it's so important to understand how much our kids learn simply by watching us. And I know it's easy to say, but it's it's a very real thing. And so I think the more that we can role model excitement for learning, and we can role model that it's okay to make mistakes. I can tell my kids till I'm blue in the face that it's okay to make mistakes. But I'm a perfectionist. And so the moment that they see me being extremely hard on myself for making mistakes, I've undermined everything that I've told them. So it's also about us working on ourselves. One of the very last chapters of the book that we wrote was actually ended up being the first chapter in the book. And we got through the whole writing process and we realized, gosh, we're asking parents to take all of these strategies and apply them to their lives, but we haven't asked them to look at why they're parenting the way that they are. How were they brought up? And so we wrote a whole chapter getting parents to really look at who they are, why they parent the way that they parent, how were academics looked at in their home, how did they grow up? What are their biases? So that they can, we kind of came at it from a physician heal thyself perspective, that before they can contribute to their teens' well-being, they need to make sure that they are in a good place and that they, that they're aware of their own biases before kind of moving forward and applying all the strategies.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's such a good point. That's really the first step before you start, let's say, developing your child or trying to instill particular characteristics or traits. It's really looking at yourself and really knowing what is your parenting philosophy or what is your education philosophy. And that's I think, a very interesting subject to explore as well as a parent.
Yeah, it's like putting your own, the old putting your own face mask on before you can put someone else's on.
Oh, absolutely. So to wrap up, I was very intrigued when I read in the book where you talk about the types of conversations you can have with your child, the types of questions you can ask. And one you mentioned already is, you every day you ask your children, well, what is their intention for the day, or what is their goal for the day? And in the book, you also you quote Nobel laureate Isidore Rabi, where he asks his children, did you ask a good question today? So did you ask a good question in school? Did you ask a good question to maybe another adult? What are some other questions we can ask our children? And what are some of those daily conversations or touch points we can have?
Yeah, so this came up because we wrote a chapter about listening skills and then eliciting meaningful dialogue with our kids, and I think it's so easy, and I still do it all the time. But it's just habit when our kids either get in the car or burst through the door. Oh, how was your day? Well, that's not going to ever elicit much meaningful dialogue, and so we have a list of honestly a plethora of questions that parents can use and try on and see what works in asking their kids to really elicit that meaningful dialogue and let them know that they're truly interested in what they have to say. So some of my favorites, I guess I'll just say the ones that I like to ask my own kids, which would be, did you help someone today? That's one that I love. What made you laugh today? Let's see, who did you sit with at lunch today? I think that can also tell us a lot about our kids and their social lives and, what's influencing them. So I would say those are probably my three favorites, but I try to rotate them so that I'm not asking the same thing every day, because then it becomes, how was your day?
Well, this is wonderful. Thank you so much, Jenn, for taking the time and for the wonderful advice you gave our listeners. It was very interesting to hear because you're already working with high school students, but a lot of the tips and the lessons you give and the habits that you discuss in the book, they start much earlier. And as you said, they start first with ourselves. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And maybe I look forward to having you on another time for a discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. If you're enjoying this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future videos.